Anyone here like sushi? Sushi fans? Anyone here doesn't like sushi? Anyone here never tried it before? A few of us in here. Listen, I'm Eric, I'm one of the pastors here, and I remember the first time that I tried sushi. I was 17 years old. It was in Nami's in Pembroke Pines. I live way down in Miami, and the reason I was up here was because we had just finished a youth summer camp at our church, and all of us were young youth leaders, and so we were on cloud nine. We were excited for all that God did through this summer camp, and someone in the church wanted to treat us out, and so they took us to this sushi restaurant, and I need to clarify some things. I know some of you may not notice it, but I don't look like a lot of you, okay? I'm half Cuban, but I'm also half Korean. Surprise! And I went to an all-Korean church, which made me sort of an outsider. See, all my friends, they had eaten sushi before, but it was my first time eating it. And I'm sitting down in this restaurant, and all my friends are celebrating, and they're eating it, and all of a sudden, all these thoughts started rushing through my mind. Like, it's cold, and it's slimy, and it's a raw fish, and does it taste terrible? And what if they start making fun of me because I don't eat it? I'm already different than them. Is this gonna, like, increase the divide between us? What if I get sick? And in my head, all of these thoughts started just to swirl around, and I started to get physically sick. I started to shake a little bit. I started to sweat, and I'm freaking out. I'm having a panic attack. All my friends are having fun. They're celebrating, and I'm just sitting there staring at this raw fish like, this could be the end of my life. This could be the end of my friendship with them. Now, eventually, I pushed through it, and I grabbed a piece of salmon, and I ate it, and I thought it was delicious. In fact, over 20 years ago, that sushi experience helped me to become really adventurous in my eating. If you know me personally, you know I like to eat all the things all of the time. And it all started right there 21 years ago. But none of my friends knew what was happening in my mind at the moment. And so today we're continuing this series of talks called Making Monsters Muppets. And the whole purpose of it is we're going to talk about some things that are really scary for us, some things that paralyze us, some things that we're terrified of, and we're going to find out how we can overcome them. We're going to find how we can be set free from them. And so today, again, it's PG-13. If you have some little ones here, it's still not too late for you to take them to Kid Street where they can learn about Jesus on their level. But today, I want to let you know that it's not going to be Sesame Street. It's not going to be sunny days and sweeping the clouds away. Because today we're talking about depression and suicide. Over 300 million people in our world today suffer from depression. And untreated depression is the number one lead to suicide. One person every 10 seconds dies by suicide in the world. And it's all of us. It's young, it's old, it's rich, it's poor, it's teacher, it's grandparent, it's professional, it's Democrat, it's Republican. We can't even say that Christians are exempt from this feeling of depression and these desires of suicide. Just this past year, we lost 2 prominent pastors to suicide. And as a church, we're scratching our heads and we're wondering why. And one of the reasons why is because we don't talk about it. It's because we're silent on it. But it affects too many people that we love. And we're not going to wait until someone that we know loses their life for us to start talking about it. So we're going to talk about it today. And we're going to shine some light on this topic. We're going to shine some light on mental illness. And our hope is that when we know Jesus and when we're honest with what we're going through, that we can find help today, that He can set us free. See, like we talked about last week with the spiritual war that we're engaged in. And even like the sushi that I ate, oftentimes it's hard for us to see what's happening inside of someone because we don't see it on the outside, right? We put up a front, we wear a mask, we hold up a puppet saying, this is what I want you to see. It's Sesame Street. My life is great, but inside, we're hurting. Especially on social media too. Especially on Instagram. We post up all the pictures that we want people to celebrate at. We want them to see all the good things that are happening in our life, but we don't post up and they can't see the hurt and the darkness that we're experiencing and the depression that we're feeling. We hide it. It's hidden. And I think one of the major reasons that it's hidden is because there's such a stigma to mental illness in our country. I mean, when it comes to physical illnesses, if someone's sick, they go see a doctor, and a doctor prescribes a medicine, and they take it, and no one thinks twice about it. But those of us who struggle with mental health, we hide it, and we're ashamed that we're talking to a counselor, or that we're on prescription medication. And I want to make this very clear. I think one of the biggest reasons why in the church it's still hidden is because when someone is brave enough to tell us what they're going through, we give all these piety religious responses. You should just pray more often. You should just come to church. You should worship harder. If you just had more faith, your depression would leave you. And when we say things like that, it makes people feel like they're less than, like they're not enough. Now, don't get me mistaken. Last week we talked in detail about it. I really, truly believe that this is a spiritual world before it's a physical world. And so I do believe that depression has some spiritual roots, and it can be a spiritual problem. But I want you to understand that if you are struggling today, it is not because you are not spiritual enough. Someone here, you need to hear that. You've been told that it's a sin, that you are feeling sick, and it's not. You're struggling, your depression doesn't mean that you are less spiritual than other people. And what you're struggling with and what you're going through doesn't define who you are. Jesus does. In 2 Corinthians 5:17, Jesus defines who we are. He says, this means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old thoughts, the old way, the old you is gone. The old life is gone. A new life has begun. When Jesus rescues you, when you surrender your life to Him, you are a new creation. The old you, the old sin, the old way of thinking, the old struggles doesn't define you. And I get, as I say that right now, some of you don't feel that way right now. You don't feel like a new creation, and that's okay. It's okay that you don't feel okay right now. You don't need to feel perfect. You don't need to be perfect. But God just wants you to get better. He wants to give you help. And today I believe that we can get better. By the grace of God, by the power of His Word, I believe that we can get better. And I believe that some of us today, our way of getting better may involve us going to see a doctor. May involve us talking to a counselor. May involve us taking some medications. And that's okay. We're going to break this stigma that mental health is a sin, that mental health means you're less spiritual, that if you need medications, that you aren't godly. No, all of us, every single one of us in this room, we struggle with something on our own. But our hope is that God gives us all a way to help. And today we want to talk about mental illness, and today we want to get some help. I want you to turn to your neighbor today. And if you're a guest here, this may seem new to you, but if this is your home, we're not just going to spit out empty platitudes. I want you to turn to your neighbor. I want you to look in the eyes. If you're here with someone that you love, tell them you can get through what you're going through. And if you're not here with someone, I want to let you know you can get through what you're going through. The presence of God is here. He wants to help. We can get through what we're going through. In 1 Kings chapter 18, it's a time in history where prophets were called by God to speak to kings. And we find this prophet named Elijah. And he goes to King Ahab and he speaks on behalf of God, saying, you are wavering in between two ways of thinking. You're supposed to be worshiping the one true God, but you're following and you're giving and you're sacrificing to these idols who are just handmade. And God wanted to prove it to Ahab, and God wanted to show Ahab who he was. And so Elijah called him to a competition. And so he gathered 850 prophets of Baal and Asher, the idols of that day. And Elijah said to them, here's what we're going to do. You grab a bull, I'm going to grab a bull. We're going to put them on an altar, and we're going to call out to our God. And the first God to consume the sacrifice, that is a true God, because there's 850 of you. You guys go first. And it says that all morning and all afternoon long, they're yelling. They're screaming, they're dancing, they're cutting themselves, they're begging and pleading, send down fire and consume the sacrifice. And nothing's happening. And Elijah, he's just so bold, he's so confident in his God that he starts to make fun of them. He says, call a little bit louder. Maybe he's taking a nap. Maybe he's in the bathroom. He literally says that, and he just starts mocking them. And then after them doing it for hours, he says, okay, enough is enough. Now it's my turn. And he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to see that the Lord is God. I want you to dig a ditch around my altar. And I want you to grab some buckets, and I want you to pour it over. And he says to do it 3 times, so much water that now the ditch, the trench is now filled up with water. And he says a simple prayer. In 1 Kings 18:36, it says, at the usual time for offering the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet walked up to the altar and prayed, "O Lord, answer me. Answer me so that these people will know that you, O Lord, are God." And listen, get this. This for us today. That you are God and that you have brought them back to yourself. That's what God wants. He wants you to come to him. He wants you to come back to him. He's not there to punish you. He's not there to harm you. Someone may have invited you here today. You may have come on your own intuition and will, but it's because of the presence of God and his promises, and he wants to draw you near to him today so you can find help and hope and healing in your life. Elijah says, "Oh God, answer me that they may know you are God and that you are bringing them back to yourself." And immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, "The Lord, He really is God." Yes, the Lord is God. Think about this. At that moment, Elijah, he's literally on a mountaintop right now. And everyone saw the work of God that had been done through his life. And everyone's snapping pictures of him. And everyone's posting about him on their Insta story. Do you see how awesome this is? Do you see how great this man of God is? Everyone's reaching out to him. My goodness, what incredible miracles you've done. But not more than a few verses. Not more than a few moments later, 1 Kings 19:1, it says, when King Ahab got home, he told his wife Jezebel everything that Elijah had done, including the way he killed all the prophets of Baal. And so Jezebel sent this message to Elijah. She said, "May the gods strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you as you have killed them." May the gods, may my gods that didn't answer, my gods that couldn't consume a sacrifice. He didn't have to worry. He didn't have to be afraid. But verse 3 says Elijah was afraid and he fled for his life. He went to BEERSHEBA, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. You need to understand, Elijah, he was a superhero of the faith. I mean, so many miracles in his ministry. He raised a young boy from death to life. He made sure that a widow had enough oil in her house. All she had to do was just bring pots, and they were miraculously filled up. The first Uber account was in Elijah's life. God brought him some Uber Eats through ravens. He was hungry, and all these birds just, "Here you go," and they dropped him food. He didn't have to leave where he was at. All these miracles in Elijah's life. And now he's afraid. Now he's anxious. He's worried. He runs away from what he's worried about. He didn't have to be worried of Jezebel. He didn't have to be worried of King Ahab. He didn't have to be worried of those lowercase gods, but he was anxious. And he ran. He ran to BEERSHEBA, the end of the civilization that they knew. Beyond that was just desert. Not only that, but he leaves his friend, the only person who was with him. Psychologists, they call this withdrawing. You're in the midst of a mental struggle and you say, "No, I can't be around anybody." Then 1 Kings 19:4, it says, then he went on alone to the wilderness traveling all day, and he sat under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. He said, I've had enough, Lord. He prayed, take my life. No better than my ancestors who already died. He's successful. Everyone loves him. But he seemingly almost instantly goes from a place of celebration to depression to thoughts of suicide. Take my life, God. I'm no good. I'm no better. Life would be better without me. I'd be fool to think that in a crowd this size that you haven't thought that before. And let me be the first to admit, I prayed that prayer. I felt that hopeless. People on the outside, they would look at my life where I'm at and they'd wonder, why would you feel that way? You have a beautiful family. You have a great familia. Why would you feel that way? Why do people, and how do people get to this place of despair and depression in their life? There's a book on mental health called Lost Connections by a guy named Johann Hari. And he struggled with mental illness for 13 years, still struggling with it today. And he was on meds, and meds are okay, but they just weren't working for him. And so he traveled around the world to speak with the world's leading mental health specialists. And over many years of research, he came together and he determined with them that there are 9 major causes of anxiety and depression. Now, that's not all of them. There's 9 major ones. I'm sure more will be found, but he says that they found out that there were 9 major causes of anxiety and depression, and only 2 of them were biological. Only 2 of them actually required medication to stabilize. One was brain changes, chemical imbalances, and the other one was genetics. And again, it's okay. There's no shame in needing to take medication. God uses that to heal sometimes. But more interesting, they found that the other 7 were social and psychological disconnections. And so you can follow along your notes or take a picture of the screens, but 7 social and psychological disconnections that lead to anxiety and depression. First one's a disconnection from a purpose. How we do things that we don't love doing and we don't take time to rest to do the things that we actually love. Second is a disconnection from people. While we're fully connected to technology, we are so disconnected to people. And when we do connect with people through technology, through social media especially, it's not to catch up with them. It's mainly to compare what they have with us. And so because of this disconnection from people, it affects our mental health. It's a disconnection from healthy values, meaning that what we put into our head and what we put into our belly so often is junk. And when we don't watch and we don't fill our mind and fill our stomach with healthy things, it affects our mental health. It's a disconnect from personal trauma. How we identify more with what we went through growing up and who we used to be rather than having hope of who we can become. It's a disconnection from personal respect. How we think we're unimportant. It's a disconnection from nature. How we spend so much of our time indoors and we never go outside. And we don't experience circadian rhythm where we see the sun rise and sunset and the moon come out, but we're surrounded by these unnatural lights and this blue light behind a screen. And we don't go out and we don't experience sunny days and sweeping clouds away and the air is sweet, and that's the quickest way to go from a place of ideal thinking like Sesame Street right to A Nightmare on Elm Street. Because we stay indoors. And it's a disconnect from a hopeful and secure future. That because we're afraid, we don't do anything today to better our tomorrow. And this is what the leading health experts in the world say lead to anxiety and depression. Now, I want to make this clear. I am not a mental health expert, and this is not a mental health facility. But it's pretty obvious that like many of us, Elijah, these thoughts of depression, it wasn't just one thing. It was compounded. It was all these failures. It was all these thoughts piled on top of one another. He was afraid. He was afraid of what Jezebel would do, even though he shouldn't have been afraid. He felt like a failure. He felt like he let God down. He felt like he let his country down. He was physically and spiritually fatigued. He was tired. He gave so much of his energy giving to the country that he had no energy for himself. He had no friends around him. He had no one to talk to. And ultimately, he had no hope of the future. And that's what depression does. We see life through dark-colored lenses. And we think that the darkness is overwhelming and that the darkness can't be overcome and that there is no hope for the future. I want to let you know today, there's always hope. There's always hope. And death is not the answer. Suicide is not the solution. You don't have to die to get help. There's a God who loves you. There's a God who's present. There's a God who wants to help you. So today, we're going to get some help. Today, when we're honest about what we're going through, we're honest with God. He's present. He's our very present help in our time of trouble. And so my prayer, and our prayer as a church, we've been praying for you. We've been praying for you all week long. That today you would listen to the Holy Spirit's voice. And you would hear what your next step is for you to find some healing, for you to find some hope, for you to be honest and say, I need help today. So in 1 Kings 19:5, it's talking about Elijah. How did he get over this hump? How did he pull himself? How was he pulled out from this spiritual and physical and mental pit of despair to go on to lead an incredible life? 1 Kings 19:5, it says, Then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. But as he was sleeping, the angel touched him and told him, Get up and eat. So he ate and drank, and he lay down again. Then the angel of the Lord came again and touched him and said, Get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you. If it feels like too much, listen to God's word. So he got up and ate and drank, and the food gave him enough strength to travel to the next step, to travel 40 miles, 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. Listen, I want to make this very practical right now, okay? Last week we talked about the spiritual aspect of it. And while this is a spiritual world, I know some of us today, we need some practical help. We've been told all you need to do is pray, all you need to do is worship, and that is not enough for us. We need some practical help. And so I want to give some real practical steps to take right now. The first thing is this. Having positive mental health requires rest, refueling, and relaxation. You want to have positive mental health? Mental health professionals all say that you need to rest, you need to refuel, and you need to relax. This is so important. Elijah, he exhausted so much of his energy mentally and physically that now he needed to rest. And we talked about this in a mini-series in June before I took time to rest from my role here. It was important for me to rest. You guys gave me the opportunity to rest. But we talked about this in great detail in a series we called R&R. And what I talked about is that we are made up of mind, body, and spirit. That's who we are. That's how God made us. And the three of those things are so tightly interwoven, they tend to catch one another's illnesses. And so if you are physically exhausted, it affects your spiritual health. It affects your emotional health. If you are emotionally tired, if you're emotionally worn out, it affects the way that you operate. It affects your body. You catch a cold, your spirit goes down. So we need to rest. Turn to the person next to you. Say, you need to rest. Again, we're not just spouting off religious platitudes. You need to rest. If you're with someone who's working themselves to death, grab their hand right now. Say, you need to rest. This is your permission to rest. And this is not just on you. This is on us. I'm going to help watch the kids. I'm going to fold the laundry. You don't have to worry about taking time off. I know we can't afford it, but we can't afford you not being here. So you need to rest. He needs to rest. We need to rest. While we're resting, we need to refuel. See, when we are mentally exhausted, we become depressed. And when we're physically exhausted, we become worn out. And so we need to rest and refuel. Say refuel. Here's what I mean by that. Here's what mental health experts mean by that. More sushi than Taco Bell. Listen, resting and refueling doesn't mean filling your mind and your body with junk food. If all you eat is Taco Bell, talking to me, if all you do is watch Netflix, if all you do is play Fortnite and eat junk food, you're not going to get the help that you need. We have to have healthy habits. We have to put healthy food into our bodies. We have to think through positive things and put healthy things into our mind. So what can we practically do? If that's you, get a physical checkup. Go to a doctor and see what's wrong with your body physically. See if there's anything wrong with you chemically. And if there is, adjust. Make the changes that you should before your body forces you to. Do you understand that? Because if you don't rest and if you don't refuel, you're either going to end up a basket case or a casket case. And God doesn't want either one for you. We need to rest. 1 Kings 19:9 says, "Then he came to a cave where he spent the night, but the Lord said to him, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?'" Now, God knew what Elijah was doing there. God helped Elijah to get there. Why would God ask him that question? To talk. To release. To get all that pent up frustration and depression and just to release it. The second thing is this. Bringing healing to our mental health requires constant communication and release through our relationships. Say release. We need to release. See, all of us, we feel overwhelmed at times. All of us feel unheard. And if we don't do something with that pressure that is bottled up inside, we're going to explode, or the pressure is going to poison our mental behavior. So we need a release. How do we release this pent-up pressure? Again, I want to make this very practical. Some of you don't want to hear this. The first thing is training. Say training. And what we mean by that is exercise. We need to exercise. Mental health experts agree that when we have a healthy process of exercising in our life, that it helps our mental health, because our bodies, they release these mood-enhancing chemicals like serotonin to make us feel better. Our body naturally releases that. And so practically, you taking a jog, you walking around your neighborhood, or like me, you riding your bike can make you feel a whole lot better. Now I get it. Some of us in here, we're struggling with depression, and it's hard for us when apathy sets in. We don't even want to get out of our house. It's hard for us to even get out of bed. Well, another thing we can do, another way we can get rid of this pent-up frustration is through our tears. You guys know I have no trouble with that. Your tears. Listen, I pray that you would never lose your ability to cry. See, some of us in here, especially some men, we think crying is weakness. No, it's not. It's a God-given way for us to release. You ever had a good cry? You ever just cried about something, now there's a weight off of your shoulders? Someone once said that the answer to all our emotional health problems is salt water. It's sweat, it's tears, and it's the ocean. Now, I'm not too sure about the last one. I know there's some beach people here, and that's your therapy. I get it. I live in South Florida. I barely go to the beach. But the third thing is by far the most important way, the most freeing way for us to get a feeling of relief, and that's through talking. Talking. All of us, we just need to talk to somebody. Well, when we talk, when we let it out verbally, it's like pulling the drain in a plug. Everything's just released and we feel better. I pray that every single person in here, that you find someone that you can confide in, that you can talk to without any judgment, without any condemnation. We need to talk to someone. The beginning of help happens when we open our mouth and we talk to someone. And that's why Familia happens here. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're talking about this. This is why we come together. This is why we connect with one another in groups. This is why we talk about so often. You can't do life alone. There's so much power and connection and communication through our relationships, through community. In fact, one of the head doctors at the University of Oregon, he said this. He says, there's probably more good that happens at 10 o'clock in the morning with two friends over coffee than all day long in the doctor's office. The doctor said that. Why? Because there's power in communication. There's release when we talk. You can't do life alone. You can't. You can't fight your battles from isolation. You can't get through what you're going through all alone. So you need to talk. And today you can talk. Today you can talk to someone. You can talk to us. And again, this isn't a mental health facility, and we are not mental health professionals. But I do believe that spiritual help is also very important. It's the foundation of everything. And so I want to encourage you and remind you, don't ever stop talking to God. You may not have someone close. In fact, this blows my mind. 38% of Generation Z, they feel like they don't have any close relationships. No one they can talk to. No wonder depression and suicide is running rampant, because we have no one to release to. But we do. It's God. He's always present. He always listens, and he doesn't listen with a judgmental ear. Notice he didn't tell Elijah, stop thinking that. You're a prophet. Get up, man. Quit. Change your thinking. Pray through it. No. He gave him time to rest. He fed him. He said, strengthen yourself. It's okay. So give it to God. He can handle it. He loves you. It's not too big for him. And no matter what you tell him, he loves you still. Don't forget to talk to God. See, it's in the connecting with God. It was in the communication with God. It's when we communicate with other people that we see what happened in Elijah's life. That God gave him a new perspective of what he was going through. He thought he was isolated. He thought he was alone. He thought he had let God down. God said, no, you're not alone. Elijah, I have people set apart for you, to support you, to care for you, who will fight by your side, who will fight for you. You are not alone, Elijah. And in talking with God and opening his mouth, he had a new perspective. Today, God wants you to talk. And he wants to speak to you. And he wants to tell you, you are not alone. You have a church familia. This is why we're here. This is why we all showed up. Not everyone here is battling a mental illness, but all of us are struggling, and we're here for you. You have a family that will fight by your side. You have a family that will fight for you. Today you can find help. Today you can find purpose even in the midst of your problems. See, when Elijah opened up his mouth, God gave him a renewed purpose. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 15 through 21, God told Elijah, I want you to go back to your problem. Don't run away from it. I want you to go back to your problem, and I want you to use it to pour into someone else. To pour into Elisha. Here's the final thing. Having hope in our mental health starts by using what we're going through to help others get through what they're going through. See, what God has been saying from the beginning is what mental health experts are finally beginning to understand, that when we live with purpose, when we help somebody else, that's where healing happens. That's where hope rises. And you don't even have to be through the other end of what you're going through. You could still be in the thick of it. You can still feel like there's darkness around you. You can still feel depressed. But when you help somebody else, both of you start to receive healing. Both of you begin to find hope. And that's why you can't give up. I know this is for someone today, but this is why we're talking about this. You can't give up. We need you. The world needs you. We need your pain. We need your progress. We need your suffering. We need your story. We need you. Don't give up. Don't believe the lie that life would be better without you. Suicide never leaves anyone better off. Your family needs you. Mom, your children need you. This church needs you. Someone out there needs you. Suicide is not the answer. The same God that you're looking forward to spending eternity with Him, He can help you get through what you're going through today. He can give you help. So don't give up. Get some help. Talk to someone. There is always hope. I know for some of you it's dark. I know for some of you feel like ending your life would be better. But there's a God who's present. And He wants to speak to you. I really do mean that. And it's not in the hype. I want you to hear that carefully, okay? Listen, I preach a whole lot better when you respond to me, when you holler back at your boy, but I know today is not the time for that. I know that for some of you, it's hard for you to lift your hands. It's hard for you to say, hallelujah, I'm healed. I know. He's a God of wonders. He is. And we'll shout that out, but He's also a God of whispers. He wants to speak to you like He did to Elijah. 1 Kings 19:11, God told Elijah, go out and I want you to stand before me on the mountain. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by, and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks were torn loose, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake. The foundation shook, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was a sound of a gentle whisper. Some of you can't cry out right now. It's okay. We don't need to shout like the prophets of Baal. We don't need to make a scene. God knows, God cares, God hears, and God whispers to you. He whispers because He's near. He's never let you go. You're still in His hands. You don't have to fight for His attention. And if you just listen, you could hear His voice. You could hear His voice of hope and healing speak to you. I formed you. I made you. I know what you're going through, and I'm going to help you get through it. And I'm going to use what you're going through to help other people just like you. But hold on. Get some help today. You may not have hope, but listen to His whisper say to you, you matter to me. I love you. Don't end your life. Today you can receive hope.